This is Bina with Garden Inspire, and we're here at Basil and Rose to talk about planting your fall garden. And Jean's here with me, and thank you for coming again, Jean.
Not a problem.
So sometimes people don't realize all the things that they can plant in the fall. They think about it as spring, maybe summer. And so perennials are a great thing to plant in the fall, whether it's shrubs, perennial flowers, trees, and sometimes this time of year you can find them on sale. Sometimes the selection isn't quite as good, but it's a great time to plant because those plants, excuse me, can get going over winter and be ready to go the next spring. So herbs are another one of the great things to plant from a plant. Have you done any?
I have never planted a fall garden.
Okay.
So you're going to educate me on how to plant a fall garden.
Okay.
I've planted gardens in the spring and I've had really good success over the years, but I have never, and I've thought about planting in the fall, this fall, and the first thing that comes to my mind is the fall planting of peas.
Okay. So
And-
there's that.
And that's the extent of my knowledge of planting a fall garden.
And peas are a great thing to plant in the fall, but you want to read the package and see how long it's going to take before it's going to produce.
So
Because
don't plant them the
peas,
1st of November.
no. Well, it depends on your climate, depends where you are. And so you want to just give enough time between your expected first frost in the fall, between when you're planting and then. Now, if for some reason the peas didn't produce peas, you can eat the whole rest of the plant. You can eat the leaves, the flowers. Did you know that?
No.
And
did
sometimes
not.
as the plant gets a little older, they get a little bit tough.
Okay.
Peas will rot in the ground if it's too wet. But peas can be a great thing to plant in the fall. Some other really great things to plant in the fall, just
Okay.
like right here, different kinds of radishes, beets, lettuce, spinach, chard, bok choy, all the cabbage family. Those are things that even if it snows or there's some frost, they're just fine.
That I did not know.
And so keep that in mind for planting in the spring too.
Okay.
So in our climate here, those are things that you can also plant beginning in March. So probably like 8 weeks or so before the first frost or before the last expected frost date, you can plant those things. But in the fall, you can do that too. And even if your spinach or lettuce or chard or whatever only gets a few inches tall,
That's
it
true.
doesn't need to be big like what you see in the grocery store.
Right. Yeah, in the small, quite often, sometimes if I'm not mistaken, the small plants, well, first off, they're more tender.
Yeah.
And in that aspect, you're going to be more easily digestible.
And tend to taste better.
And they'll taste better because you're not dealing with a plant that's gotten mature and turned into trying to eat wood.
Right. Or getting ready to flower and
Getting
go to
ready to
seed,
flower and go
which
into
sometimes
seed.
they still taste good that way.
Okay.
But baby spinach, do you know what baby spinach is?
Rabbit food. No, I don't.
Baby spinach is just spinach harvested at a younger stage.
Okay.
It's not a different kind of spinach.
Oh.
So if you harvest those things when they're smaller, then you have this gourmet food of baby spinach and baby lettuce. You just harvested it when it's younger. Now, one fall, I planted my spinach a little bit late, or maybe there was frost a little sooner than normal. So the spinach only got maybe 1 inch tall and it just quit growing for the year.
Right.
And I just left it there, and in the spring it just continued on after, the weather got a little bit nicer, and then I harvested it the next year. So even if you're not able to harvest it this fall, then you should be able to harvest most of these next spring. But if you plant them 30 to 60 days before your first frost date, which in my area that's about October 5th. Now if you don't know when that is, look up your county extension office and ask them. And every county in the United States has a county extension office, and you can find out. You might be able to just search online and find average first and last frost dates for your area just by Googling that. Also, if you go to gardeninspire.com and go to resources, there's actually a link to find your extension service to find that out, and hardiness zones and all that.
Okay. Now,
So-
I have a question for you
Uh-huh.
here. Okay. I was in Southeast Asia a long, long time ago. Many, many moons ago. Okay, I look at this and it says bok choy. Okay, what is bok choy?
So it's in Asian food, sometimes it's in the cabbage family.
Okay,
And it's green with a midrib that's really white.
okay.
And it'll be in different sizes. Sometimes it's called pak choi. I believe they're the same thing. There's several related vegetables, and I'm not always sure, you
What
know, all
exactly
the
it is.
differences, but they're all similar
Okay.
kinds of plants. And cabbage family, everything in the cabbage family you could plant and at least get some leaves.
Yeah.
So last year I planted some broccoli in the spring, like
Mhm.
normal. And for some reason, it must have been the weather or something, it got several feet tall, no broccoli, just the leaves.
Right.
So I could have just eaten the leaves, because you can eat the leaves of stuff in the cabbage family. But I just left it since it never produced. I knew that the next spring it might produce broccoli. And so this spring I got broccoli from the broccoli I planted last spring. And so that kind of thing can happen. But ideally, when you're planting in the fall, these are things you want to harvest in
You
the
want to
fall.
harvest them
Yeah,
that fall
right.
before the snow falls.
Right. But again, if you're not able to do that, just leave them in the ground, and most likely you'll be able to harvest them the next spring.
Okay.
And then some other things that you can grow. So this is a saffron bulb. And saffron is a purple flower, a crocus, actually, that's a fall blooming crocus, but it's a specific kind. And it's the world's most expensive spice. So those red orange pieces, those are the stamens, and that's the part you harvest to use in cooking. So if you're in a zone 6 or warmer, you can probably grow saffron in your area. And why not? It's beautiful. You can harvest it, cook with it, use it medicinally. So that's another great thing to plant in the fall. And even though it blooms in the fall, you do plant it in the fall.
And that is one extremely expensive
Oh yeah,
spice.
because it has to be hand harvested, and each flower only produces 3 of those. So
That
growing it,
explains why when you find it in the store, it's this little tiny bottle, and it's
yes,
got this astronomical price on it.
right.
Okay.
So you can grow it yourself. So another thing you can plant in the fall, and the saffron, it'll just get leaves the first fall after you plant, and the next year it will bloom, and then from there on. So another great thing to plant in the fall is garlic. And there's what's called hardneck garlic and softneck garlic, and you can grow either one, but softneck tends to keep longer. So if you want garlic for storage. So at least here in Utah, where we are, and many other places, it's recommended to plant garlic in September, October, and then harvest the next July.
Okay.
And so you would take,
You break that open to get your cloves out.
And so if you're just buying it from the grocery store or whatever, you're not going to know what kind it is. So if you want to know whether it's hardneck or softneck, what
So we
variety,
come see you.
then you can buy it somewhere like Basil and Rose that has garlic, and you break it into the little cloves, and you plant these separately, about 3 inches deep, 6 inches apart.
Cool.
And then each of these will form a new whole bulb.
Bulb.
Yes. And then in the next July, the leaves will start falling over, and you know it's time to harvest, so you can dig them up.
Okay, so this is one you plant in the fall,
Uh-huh,
and you plan on harvesting it in mid-July
right, of the next year.
of the next
Yes.
following year.
And then another great thing to plant in the fall are wildflowers.
Okay.
So wildflower seeds, I sell them at Basil and Rose that are Utah wildflowers. So for my area, it's nice to get wildflowers that are native to wherever you are if you're trying to have an actual wildflower garden. So a lot of
Well-
wildflowers do well going through some cold first.
Yeah, and another advantage of that of the wildflowers that I can think of, you're going to bring in natural insects.
Right,
You're going to bring in the natural birds, hummingbirds, things of that nature.
right.
And I was amazed when I moved to Utah how many hummingbirds we have here. And they are a lot of fun to watch.
Yes. And you get the native bees,
Yeah.
which can help pollinate your vegetable garden also. So the wildflowers, you can plant them other times of the year, but it's just in the fall if you're scattering them. Then nature hopefully is helping with the watering for you. And some of them do better going through a little bit of cold period before they start
Before they
sprouting.
germinate.
So that can be a great time. So perennials, trees, shrubs, some annual vegetables, the ones that like the cool weather, native flowers, garlic, saffron. I forgot to mention, so with some of the herbs. So cilantro, people have trouble growing that sometimes. Is that something you use or have ever grown?
I've never grown cilantro, and I don't
Okay.
know if I've ever even used it.
Okay. Well, it's something that I used to think really stunk. And now I really like it, actually.
Well, cool.
So I like it in a lot of different things. But cilantro and dill are two herbs that don't like the heat. So fall is a great time to plant them again. And they produce fairly quickly, and they will last longer as far as getting the leaves if you're planting them in cooler weather.
And dill is something I like to use when I cook a fair amount of salmon. I like salmon, and when I'm cooking the salmon, I'll cook it in butter with some dill on it. And to grow my own dill would be a big advantage.
Yes. And sometimes dill and cilantro may reseed themselves, so you may not need to keep planting it over and over again. But if they don't, just plan on planting it every few weeks to get a constant supply. So before you plant, if you're using a raised bed especially, but even in other cases, I'd recommend putting some compost down, then plant your seeds or dig a hole to plant your bulbs, whatever it is you're planting that way. And then just a big thing is don't plant things too deeply. So I've talked to several people recently that have planted seeds too deeply. Do you know how deeply to plant a seed?
General rule of thumb, no, I don't.
Okay.
Corn, as a kid growing up in Illinois, we had the old corn planter that I haven't seen one since I was a little kid. You'd stuff it in the ground, open up like this and close it, and it would drop 3 seeds.
So, and we're planting probably less than you were planting, but you want to go 2 to 3 times deeper than the size of the seed. So a corn plant corn seed is much bigger than a lettuce seed.
Right.
So you're going to plant a corn seed more deeply than you would a
You're gonna
lettuce
plant it 2
seed.
to 3, about a couple inches down.
Well, not that deep, but
an inch or so down. Whereas with lettuce, you're basically going to just break the surface,
Right.
plant your lettuce seed, cover it back
Right.
up, and call it good.
because if you plant too deeply, either the plant's going to take a long time to emerge or it's not going to at all.
Right. Okay. Now I have a question on the aspect. Okay, I have both raised bed boxes, and I also have a garden plot that I've raised in the past.
Okay.
Now that ground has been sitting dormant for a number of years. And then I have a rear tine tiller that I'm going to use to till everything in. It's been sitting there.
So I've never tilled in my life,
Okay,
and I don't think it's a good idea.
all right.
So I just put compost down and plant. So some concerns I have about tilling, it actually damages the soil. It kills off some of the soil life, earthworms, microorganisms that are very important to have healthy soil and also healthy plants.
I'm looking at a garden that's roughly 60 feet wide and 60 feet wide and 30 feet deep.
Right.
That's a lot of compost.
Right, but some of those are going to be pathways.
Yes,
You don't need to put compost over pathways, you're just walking on them.
right,
So you only want to put compost where you're actually going to plant.
okay.
And then the other thing is, if you till, it's chopping up weed roots, such as bindweed, grass roots, and you'll have more of those.
Right.
It's also bringing weed seeds to the surface. Weed seeds usually don't germinate if they're in the dark. So there could be some weed seeds underground for 50 years, and you just brought it to the surface, and boom, it's going to grow.
Merry Christmas.
And then the other thing is, if you till to the same level all the time, so
Right.
let's say you till to 8 inches regularly, you create a hard pan at 8 inches, and the roots of plants and water have a hard time penetrating that.
Okay.
So there's several reasons it's actually not a good idea to till. Plus, then you're paying for the tiller and the gas and
tiller's
get it
already bought.
repaired. Right. But now you could sell it. But anyway, if I just put compost down, you don't need to put it where you're going to be walking. You
Right.
just need to put it where you're going to be planting.
Mhm.
And it's a great idea to make your own, because then you're not having to go buy a bunch of compost. So
Right.
making your own is a great idea. Sometimes I teach a composting class too. You can compost right in that place,
That you're-
and then you're not moving compost to that area. If you're just composting right there, the compost is already there,
That makes
so
sense.
you're not having to haul it in.
Yeah.
So putting compost down and then planting, you're adding organic matter in, which is adding nutrients in, microorganisms in, to help you have some healthier plants.
I know when I was a kid, we moved into town from the country, and we put in rotten manure from the feedlot. We had the greenest yard in the neighborhood
And that
for
is
years.
compost,
Yes, it
yes.
was.
So compost is just decomposed organic matter, and it can be manures, it can be plant material.
But if you're using manure, there's certain types you can use, certain types you can't.
So-
Rabbit manure you can put on directly as it, from right below the cages. Cow, horse, chicken, you've gotta let it rot first.
So there's some misconceptions about the manures. First of all, you only want to use manures from those kinds of animals. So poultry, sheep, goat, rabbits, cattle. Horse I've never used. You can use it, but be aware of weed seeds because the weed seeds tend to go right through the
Through
horse.
horses, they do.
So sometimes there's more weeds in there. So certainly composting the horse manure for a while to a hot enough temperature to kill weed seeds would be a good idea. So I have put composted manure on my lawn many times. I've told many clients to do that. Never a problem at all.
Yeah.
I've cleaned out people's chicken coops to put it on my lawn. I've never had a problem. So composting other than rabbit is a good idea, but it
Right.
doesn't need to be for a long period of time. It could have composted already in the chicken coop enough to be where you can put it on your lawn. Also, if you're putting it on your garden in the fall in places you're not planting anyway, then
gonna break down
it's
during the
going to break
wintertime.
down over winter.
Yeah, you've gotta have that breakdown period.
But there's there's a lot of concern where people think, oh, it's going to burn everything. I've never ever had compost burn anything.
Compost, no.
Right.
But my grandfather put fresh manure on his garden from his,
But it
from his
depends on the
barn.
kind.
He was a dairy farmer.
And if it was straight out of the cow, yes.
Yes, that's what he did.
But if it was sitting there a little while in the barn, because sometimes it is.
They had to clean the dairy barn every day. They
Okay.
cleaned it twice a day. And Grandpa took some in a wheelbarrow and put it over on his garden right out of the barn. And when we got there the next year, he was chewing my dad out because he'd burned his garden. And Dad says, no, Grandpa, you don't take it off out of the barn, you take it off the manure pile.
Yes. But again, if you're making your own compost,
Yeah.
you're familiar with it. I have a rabbit, so I can put it right on my garden. There's enough of it that I put some of it in my compost pile too. And worms love it.
The best garden I ever had is when I was raising rabbits. I literally had an unbelievable, just a small garden that was like 20 feet wide and maybe 20 feet deep. And I harvested and I harvested and we harvested and harvested off that thing. It was amazing how much produce we got out of that garden. A couple of years I had rabbits.
But any kind of compost is going to be really good. So those are some of the things you can plant in the fall and a little bit about how to do it. And I hope that you will do that because there's no point in when your tomatoes or zucchini are done or you're sick of them that you just let that space go to waste. You might as well use that space.
Don't throw them in the garbage can, put them in the compost.
Right. Well, thank you very much for attending our live event here, and I hope that's helped you with learning how to plant your fall garden.